Hey guys, welcome back to Big Riff Energy. Today I'm going to be talking about our new album, Ghost at the Gallows, out August 18th, right around the corner. This will be a three-parter, and on parts 2 and 3, I'm going to have guests in here who are involved in making this album. But today I'll just focus on my experience with it, which is primarily going to be like the songwriting, demoing, events that transpired leading up to the recording. And I'll talk a little bit about, the artwork and that whole process. And then on the subsequent episodes, we'll dive more into like studio stuff and that sort of thing. I do want to remind you we're playing some shows with Wake and Pallbearer the week after this album comes out. It's going to be our album release shows. Tickets at spiritadrift.com/tour. We're also playing Metal Injection Fest in September. And yeah, I also want to mention, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're a fan of this content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Do me a huge favor and subscribe. What's in it for you? What's in it for me, might you ask? I'm just shy of 1,000 subscribers. Once I get there, I can start monetizing these videos, which means I can start spending more time on them and make the whole thing better and add some production value and stuff like that. And if you're just listening, you just missed out on some really cool special effects. So yeah, subscribe, like, do all that. Write me at bigriffenergy@gmail.com if you have questions or suggestions or anything like that. And on that note, since we're talking about the new album, the theories on the first 2 lines of I Shall Return continue to pour in, but no one's gotten it yet. It's the first 2 lines. Onward, the mountain is the way. Following the eagle, I carry the flame. It's those 2 lines. There's an inside joke in there about FM rock radio. And I literally can't give you more clues than that, or I'll literally just be telling you what it is. Somebody guessed Over the Mountain. It's not, there are some subtle references to some FM hard rock and metal songs later in the song. There's some like Gene Clark references and stuff like that. I love sneaking in just little subconscious nods to some of my favorite lyricists and musicians and stuff. But it ain't that. I'm talking about the first 2 lines. Troy, man, you were so close. You were so close. You were talking about the mountain being the FM radio station in Tucson, which I gave away. That's the biggest hint I could possibly give. But then, Troy, you started talking about Hotel California, and a lot of people have been bringing that up, oddly enough. It ain't that. It's not a reference to a song or a band or a movie or a book. So, Troy, you were close. Give it another shot, and I bet you will win a copy of our new album, Ghost at the Gallows, which I started writing in March of 2020. I would say I demoed the first song 2 days into COVID lockdown. And that song was These Two Hands. It's track 4 on the new record. It's the most deeply personal song that I've ever written, and definitely the most personal song that I've ever recorded or let anybody else listen to or anything like that. I write lyrics pretty far after the fact, after I've finished demoing the music and stuff. But the nature of that song musically, I feel like I already knew what it was going to be about, even when I was just writing the music. And it's really heavy. There are interviews with Hetfield back around the time of the Black Album talking about Nothing Else Matters, and that song just being for him, and he didn't want anybody else to hear it. He damn sure didn't want to record it for Metallica. And other people heard it and told him what a great song it was and encouraged him to get it out there. And he did. And I think there's nothing more important as an artist than to be real and to be vulnerable, especially when it makes you uncomfortable, like genuinely uncomfortable, which is very rare for me when I'm writing or creating something. These Two Hands was that song for me. I wouldn't compare it to Nothing Else Matters in any other way, sonically or thematically or anything like that, but just the fact that it was so personal that I didn't really want anybody to hear it. And then as I started sharing it with people, everyone unanimously was just like, you have to put this is like maybe the best song on the album. And that was the first one I wrote. Yeah, March 2020. I was also writing what would become the Forge Your Future EP. I talked about that in that episode. Just cranking stuff out. It was just kind of flowing out of me. I seem to write pretty prolifically when there's stuff going on, like stressful, painful stuff going on. That's what really cranks up the engine, the creative engine. And that's definitely what was happening back in March 2020. And there was something obviously different about that song, These Two Hands, from the beginning. And mentally, I sort of set that one aside from everything else that I was writing. And it dictated the direction of the new album, that song. There was another song that I wrote and demoed around that time, maybe a little bit later, that I was calling Tomorrow Disappears. And there was one riff in particular in that song that I was really, really excited about and really proud of. And that song sort of fit the vibe of These Two Hands. And so then I had two songs. And that next song I wrote, Tomorrow Disappears, I was like, this is the standard by which any other song will be judged in order to make it on the next full-length album. And, it was a pretty high bar. And then ironically, what ended up happening is as I was writing and demoing, over the course of the next 2 years, that song, Tomorrow Disappears, didn't even make the cut. I took a riff from it, maybe a couple riffs, and repurposed those riffs into different songs. But I set personally what I considered a very high standard for myself. And then that standard, by the end of the writing process, was no longer even acceptable because the stuff that I had written, I was so much more excited about than that song that I wrote in March that, didn't even make the cut. I spent a lot of time writing this album. And it makes a difference. It really makes a difference. Every other album that I've worked on, maybe with the exception of Forge Your Future, which I know is an EP, but I definitely put it up there with any of our albums. But I would say that's the only one other than the new album that I didn't feel some very strict budgetary restraints, time restraints. It's really all just time because you're paying day rates on studios and producers and stuff like that. You might be traveling out of state, whatever. And so it really does just boil down to time. And, having been in 2 touring bands simultaneously, 2 bands that are also recording pretty frequently, there was always, it just never felt like there was enough time. And, Black Sabbath recorded their first album in a day. So you can make that your friend or you can make that your foe. And I think I've done a pretty good job of making things work out at the highest possible level of quality despite certain time restrictions. But I will say with Ghost at the Gallows, I didn't have any of those restrictions. And I think it made a huge difference on the quality of the material. I really do feel that it's the best songs that I've written. It's the best quality recording we've ever gotten. It's definitely the best vocal performance I've ever done. Time with vocals is a huge thing because if your voice is tired or suffering, there's nothing you can really do to get around that. It's going to affect the quality of the singing. So if you have an basically unlimited amount of time to record vocals, you're going to get a better performance. And that's what happened. And so going back to the songwriting thing, I had 2 songs, March, April, and I started working on the title track in 2020 as well, Ghost at the Gallows. That song was originally supposed to be the opening track of the album. And by the time I wound up in the studio in Cedar Creek, Texas in 2022. Give Her to the River had transformed so much as a song and become so monumental that we didn't really see much choice other than to open the album with Give Her to the River. I think it's the strongest song on the record for sure. And it showcases every aspect of the rest of the songs on the album. So it's like a perfect opening song. Meanwhile, Ghost at the Gallows seemed to now only fit at the end. And it's cool. Those are the two most ambitious, dynamic, longest, most epic songs on the album. So I think it's really rad to bookend everything with those two songs. But I had Ghost at the Gallows. I had some version of that song demoed in late 2020. 2021, of course, we recorded the Forge Your Future EP. Played some shows. I'm just writing and demoing this whole time. Some of the songs that ended up on this album are barely recognizable in their final form when compared to the initial demo form. And they're all better. Track 3, Hanged Man's Revenge, I distinctly remember demoing that because I wanted just a really straightforward metal song. I wanted a song with double bass and really thrashy technical guitars, but also big giant, big riff energy, big Sabbath riffs. And so I threw all that in a blender and got Hanged Man's Revenge. But I know for sure the first version of that song, the guitar work, I hate to say it, but it was boring. The drums were exciting because it was a lot of double kick and stuff. Mickey D, Motorhead, King Diamond type drumming, but the guitar riffs were just kind of lackluster. And I worked on the verse riff of Hanged Man's Revenge for 2 years. And I think when you hear it, I think people will appreciate the amount of work that went into that verse riff. It's one of the it's one of the more challenging riffs I've written. There's definitely some Mustaine in there. There's some really long reaching stuff, and it's fast right hand, lots of twang. I can't help but write a riff with twang in it. So that's how extreme I was getting with the fine tuning of this stuff. I would focus on one riff for 2 years and step away from it for long periods of time, obviously, but just get really, really honest with myself. Is this riff or is this part of the song the best that it can possibly be? And I would ask myself that a lot over the course of literally years, So I don't think, I know that I was not able to do that with any other Spirit Adrift album. And I'm pretty sure that you do a better job, or at least for me, I'm pretty sure that I'm able to come up with something better when I have that much time to really break it down. Because anyone in a band that makes records can attest to the fact that more often than not, when you're done and it's a year later and you listen back to stuff, there's a lot of moments where you're like, damn, I wish I had done this or that. And there's always going to be that. But those moments are very, very few and far between on Ghost at the Gallows for me. There's not, man, I can't say that there's really anything that I wish that I had done differently, or a riff that I wish had resolved differently, or a vocal that was different, or anything like that. I'm definitely more satisfied with this one than with any other record I've ever made. And that comes from learning while you're creating. I've talked about it a little bit. Like, I've been learning on the job since I started Spirit Adrift. I didn't take a long time preparing a vision and making sure that I'm like really able to sing the way I want to sing and write the way I want to write. I just did it. I just started doing it. It's exactly what happened with this podcast too. I had no intentions or no vision or no concept. Really, I just started doing it. And then it's grown into something that's way cooler than anything I would have intentionally designed. It just happened naturally. And you're watching me learn on the job. When you listen to Spirit Adrift, you're hearing me learn on the job. And I think that's why every album gets better, in my opinion. And I'm really proud of this record. Worked on it, wrote it, demoed it for a couple years. Once I started really seeing an 8-song album take shape, started writing lyrics, I got in touch with Jeremy Hush, who did the artwork, and sent him over some notes, just general stuff. The Colorado River down here has been a big part of the creative process for me. Living out in the woods, kind of spooky out here, lots of wildlife, being out in nature a lot. So a lot of the notes I sent to Hush were regarding that sort of stuff, themes and different wildlife we could incorporate, because I know he likes painting birds and creatures, creatures of the night. And I didn't really, usually I do a sketch. Like when I've worked with Joe Patagno, I send him sketches. But I don't think I did that with Jeremy. I just sent him lyrics and I sent him, concepts and different little stuff I would like to incorporate. There was a moment in the demoing process when I felt like, okay, this album is officially demoed. And I knew that little parts would change. They always do. But I felt like the album itself was there in a demo form. And I could see it and I could hear it from start to finish. And I felt a big sense of accomplishment. It was a major turning point for sure. And I did end up putting more work into the songs and, improved them all the way up until we recorded them, at least in my opinion. But that day that I finished demoing the album, I would say, I went out my back door and I just started walking. We got some trails out there. And I came up on a dead tree. There was a really massive forest fire out here like 10, 11 years ago. There was one just the other day too, across the street. But a bunch of stuff burned down. And so out back on our land, it's like there's still ashes back there. There's burned up trees. There's rocks that were like turned into calcified lava looking stuff. And then there's all this new stuff growing up out of it. So, out from death springs life type of vibe out there. It's pretty heavy to go out there and think about it. And that's what I did. I walked out there, and in a dead, burned up tree was an owl just staring at me. And I just stared back at him. And I was like, let me see how long this guy just sits there and we stare at each other. And it was a long time. I lost track of time. It felt like a couple of hours, honestly. But I would say it was like half an hour, 45 minutes, legitimately, that I just stood there breathing, sort of meditating, staring at this owl. And then it flew away. And shortly after that, I walked back to that back property again. And for some reason, I went off the trails and I just started walking through all this undergrowth and brush. I have no idea why. I'm just kind of exploring. But I got like tangled up. Like it was really overgrown and not an easy or comfortable path to get through. There was no path, really. I was just walking through a bunch of brush. And I was going and going and going, like kind of scratching myself up. And, it's almost dark. I would say it was a very heavy dusk, like at the end of twilight, if you will. And I got through all this brush finally and got to the creek bed. And there was this deer skull, a buck skull with the antlers that's behind me here. It was just sitting there waiting for me to find it. It was very strange. I walked right to it. And by this time the moon was out and it was almost kind of like a spotlight on this white set of antlers, and there were a couple of bones and stuff. So I took them in up to the house and cleaned them up. I've since found some more stuff back there, which I add to my little altar here. And so I sent some of these ideas to Jeremy Hush. I didn't really put more emphasis on one or the other. I don't think I told him any of that. I just said, here's the lyrics, here's the themes. You know, water's a theme, fire's a theme, death is obviously the main thing, death and grief and loss. Maybe a little bit of like rebirth from death, or the continuation of the cycle, or the flow, or the great river. You know, that's a big theme. And he came back with a sketch of this cover with the owl on it. And I had barely mentioned an owl, but it sort of freaked me out when I saw that he would just pick that out of everything that I gave him, not knowing about my encounter with the owl. So I said, yeah, that's it. That's it. And then he sent over the back cover, which, we talked about the stone tape theory, not the stoned ape theory, but the stone tape theory, which is sort of relating to ghosts and hauntings and supernatural stuff. And that theory is present in the front cover and the back cover. The theory that we might live on because energy cannot be created or destroyed, at least according to contemporary physics, which changes all the time. But that's sort of the main theme. We all die. We all grieve when our loved ones die. But perhaps it's just a transformation of energy and matter. That's at the heart of this album. And I think it's really reflected in the artwork. Jeremy did an incredible job. And it was a pretty massive undertaking for him. He did a painting for each individual track on the album. Album comes with a full 12-inch booklet, so does a CD. And yeah, front cover, back cover, the booklet gets an image, and every song got an image. And I'm really pleased with the physical album that has been produced as a result of all this hard work and focus and dedication by everybody involved. This altar back here, it's the deer antlers. It's the feather of a Mexican eagle, which was, I was kayaking here on the Colorado River, and I was being circled by 3 Mexican eagles, and one of them dropped his feather in the water. So that got added to the altar, and the 3 Mexican eagles became I Shall Return, that artwork. Got a couple more deer bones that I've found as I'm carving out new trails and paths in the back of our land. And the rattle from the giant western diamondback that I killed when our neighbors were in trouble. I don't know if that's coming through or not. So that's my little Ghost at the Gallows altar. That's some of the stuff that was going on. Very strange events, as always. I've found that when I'm being active with Spirit Adrift, whether it's writing, creating songs, writing riffs, writing lyrics, gearing up for tours, stuff like that, very strange synchronistic events start taking place. And I definitely believe in signs. And I don't know if that's the human mind being pretty much programmed to seek out patterns in nature, you know. Some of the stuff I experience, I can't quite be explained away with that standard explanation. And I'll talk about another instance of that sort of thing. So I mentioned the song Give Her to the River earlier. That was going to be the closing song of the album initially. And I had an intro, and I had like a 7 or 8 minute song. And the song was kind of mid-tempo. That's what I remember about it. Very mid-tempo, pretty much the whole time. Kind of chuggy, kind of heavy, sad sounding. But that inner voice, or that inner guide that is perpetually disrupted when a song isn't quite right. You can try to shut that voice up consciously as much as you want, but it's there and it cannot be ignored forever. And as much as I wanted that song to be done, this is the song, these are the riffs, these are the parts. It just, out of all 8 songs that I had, I just kind of, and that was an issue. Like I had these 8 songs decided upon, and then I would be working on one of them and have a breakthrough, and it would suddenly become my favorite out of the 8 songs. And it would make the other 7 seem lacking. And so then I would have to go through every song, like, how can I make this better? And that just went on and on and on and on. Hanged Man's Revenge verse riff was a prime example of that. But when I arrived at the perfect verse riff for that song, I knew it. I knew it in my bones. I just immediately, that inner conflict was resolved. That inner voice that was hungry for something was satisfied. And the last song to satisfy that inner voice was Give Her to the River. And here's how it happened. I'm going to go out there and take a picture of this tree and superimpose it while I'm telling this story. I was hanging out in here. This is like my little office creative temple or whatever. And there was a thunderstorm coming in. And suddenly a giant pine tree right in front of this window in front of me was struck from top to bottom, from the top of the tree all the way down through the roots by a bolt of lightning. And the air pressure in the house changed so much that I thought the windows were going to blow out. It was the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. And I've seen Motorhead a few times. I worked a Motorhead show, so I was right up by their by their backline, and this, even Motorhead at full volume, does not compare to the sound pressure waves created by that bolt of lightning going through that pine tree. It was like terrifying. It blew a light out in our house somehow, just one light. I don't know how that works. We got rocked by that lightning. And the next day, I was in the kitchen just like minding my own business, doing something. And I had a whole song implanted in my mind from somewhere else instantly, like that. I don't know if those two things are connected, but it's just weird. It's weird. And so here I am with this 7 or 8 minute song that I've been sitting on probably for a year at this point, wondering, like, trying to like be in denial about it not being right, but still in the back of my mind occasionally wondering, like, what the hell's going on with that song? And then I get, the house gets rocked by a bolt of lightning, and suddenly I have a brand new song that has very little to do with the first version of Give Her to the River. Yet I somehow recognize instantly that's Give Her to the River, the song that was now implanted in my mind. So I ran in here. I kept the original intro. That was always my favorite part of the song, and I never felt like the rest of the song lived up to the expectations that were established by the intro. Whereas this new song that I had been given by Zeus or Thor or whoever, this new song did live up to the intro. And I sat and hit record. I found my tempo and I hit record, started after the intro, and played the whole song start to finish. And the cool thing about Ghost at the Gallows is every song on the record was a result of that level of spontaneity and that level of just magical inspiration. All the good songwriters say the same thing, that they don't understand how they write good songs, and that they think the best songs that they've produced are the result of some other force that they don't understand. And I have become so obsessed with that concept that I won't even consider demoing something unless it comes about in that fashion. If I have to sit and think about it, I'm talking about the initial phase. Of course, like once you get something down and you're writing a full song and arranging a full song, obviously I'm going to start putting thought into it and really leaning into intuition as to how the song should flow and how many times you should play this part or that part. But as far as these initial seeds of inspiration go, I only really let myself record something or demo something if it hits me out of nowhere and it's almost like it's come from some sort of plane of creative existence that is superior to this plane of reality that we dwell in. I really kind of believe in that, to be honest. You know, guys like David Lynch, he's like really into transcendental meditation. And that's where some real magic starts happening, is tapping into that deep well of creative inspiration that's really catty corner to things like love and joy and hope, stuff like that. There's a well that we cannot access with our conscious minds. And I think you can access it in dreams or in the state between waking life and sleep, or in moments where your conscious mind is just sort of shut off and not paying attention. You can really dig down into that well of, I'll call it like the well of riffs. That's what I use it for, you know, the well of rock. Or I guess David Lynch would look at it as like a well of abstract weirdness that triggers some sort of emotional response, even though you don't consciously understand it. It's all there. And yeah, I feel like this is the first Spirit Adrift album where every second of the album came from that place. And it's cool. And I think I can't wait to keep making songs, because I feel like, yeah, the more I do it now, that's my focus. You know, in the past, my focus was like, how can I sing better? How can I do this better? How can I write a song better? And I feel like I just keep leveling up. And so now I'm like, how can I access that mystical well of inspiration better? And Ghost at the Gallows is the first time that, yeah, front to back, it all came from there. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much about like meeting Mike Fury, our drummer. We met, I guess, in 2021, summer of 2021, jamming in another band. And then it became apparent that Spirit Adrift needed a drummer, and he ended up being the drummer. I'll let him talk a little bit more about that in the next episode. But yeah, we ended up working on this album together. Went and recorded drums in Chicago with Sanford, who recorded Curse of Conception and Divided by Darkness. We recorded the drums for Divided by Darkness in Chicago at Electrical Audio. And there were a few hiccups in that process. And I always wanted to go back and sort of see if we could have a more of like a home run experience. So Mikey and I went to Electrical Audio in Chicago, September 2022. We were there when the first day of fall hit, and it was like somebody flipped a switch. I mean, the temperature dropped like 30 degrees on us, you know, and there was like a breeze and leaves blowing around, and it was like, holy shit, it's fall. It is fall on the first day of fall, you know. We recorded drums there in Chicago. Again, I'll save that for when Mikey's here. And then we brought the drum tracks back to Texas. Took them over to Red Nova Ranch. My good buddy Jeff Henson from the band Duel has a studio right down the road from me. Another weird twist of fate, you know. And we recorded bass, guitars, vocals, everything else there. And that's why I was able to take so much time on vocals. We would do a couple of songs. If my voice started feeling rough, take a weekend off, come back, knock them out. So I was able finally to fully rely on like my full capabilities as a vocalist. On previous albums, there was always a point that we reached where I felt like I was compromised. My singing was compromised. But we didn't have any choice but to knock it out because of time constraints and that sort of thing. Whereas Ghost at the Gallows, there were no time constraints. That was a rule that I made for myself making this album, is that no matter how long it takes, no matter how much money we have to spend, no matter who is getting impatient about it, no matter if there are tours coming up, we are going to do this album exactly the way that we want to, where every single person involved is like 100% satisfied. And I think I'm probably the hardest person to satisfy. So if I'm happy, I feel like everyone else probably is pretty happy. Henson, you know, Sanford and Henson are pretty hard to satisfy too. Sanford's softened up a little bit in his old age, but I don't think Henson has at all. And I love that. I love feeling like I'm with a psychedelic drill instructor when I'm working on an album. And that's definitely the vibe that Henson has. So that was great. I'll let him talk a little bit more about that when he comes in. What else, man? Yeah, I don't know. This album, it's very special to me. It's very important to me. Every Spirit Adrift album is like super real and very profound. I've been through a lot in my life, and I put it into this music. I don't know. My wife told me yesterday, she was like, we were just talking about it. You reach a certain point where I know that I'm satisfied, and it's not really even any of my business what anybody else thinks about the records that I make or the songs that I make. As long as I'm happy and I'm satisfied, then I'm doing my duty as an artist, you know? But she said, like, you know, I love all your albums. I think they're all good, but this one is different. And I think different, she meant, you know, it hits different. It does, man. I'm very proud of it. And a lot of that is due to the other people involved. You know, we just had the A team, like Zeus mixed and mastered it. I picked on the production side of things. I just picked all my favorite dudes that I've worked with and found a way to include all of them. And, you know, I've been working with Sanford since 2008. And, man, I was up there when, when Obama got elected and gave his acceptance speech in 2008. And I walked my ass like 2.5 hours from the studio to the park where he gave his acceptance speech in front of however many thousands of people. And, what a trip, man. This was with my Arkansas band. And I remember like the rest of the dudes went out with a guy that sort of ran Kuma's Corner at the time and had a pretty wild time without me. And I remember walking back from Obama's speech through the streets of Chicago, and it was just like the biggest party I've ever seen in my life. People were high-fiving. Cops were like dancing, high-fiving people. It was like the closest thing to a utopia I've ever experienced. People were psyched. And I remember listening to a voicemail from my band's singer, Andy, and it was all jumbled. There was like so much noise in the background. They were out doing whatever. And all I could make out was like, don't snort the shit that's on the table in the studio. And then I hear a bunch of bullshit and he goes, do not snort that or you will die. So I got back to the studio and our bass player was the only one there, and there's a bag on the table. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And it was something you don't want to snort. So I mean, I got a million stories about Chicago and recording in Chicago and recording with Sanford. And he's one of my favorite dudes. So of course had to include him. Of course had to include Jeff Henson because he's right down the street and he's one of my favorite dudes in the world, man. We have almost the exact same mind for rock and creativity and riffs and just life. And the way that we worked together on this album, it was almost like we were sharing the same brain. Got to the point where we didn't have to talk. We were like past the point of finishing each other's sentences. It was just what's understood don't gotta be explained. And we were in that optimal zone of creativity. And Zeus same thing, man. I talked about him on the Forge Your Future episode. Yeah, what's understood don't got to be explained. And I just feel it's such a cool feeling to be able to just pick an A team of like my favorite engineers, producers, mixers, musicians, people. I just feel very grateful. Spirit Adrift has given me so many cool opportunities to work with people I love and respect and admire. And although the themes and the motivation for making an album like Ghost at the Gallows is pretty fucking dark and gloomy and emotionally crushing, it is very cool to be able to take those painful experiences and painful parts of life and transmutate that into something that allows me to have great uplifting experiences and have something to show for it. Even if I wasn't making a record, getting to go to Chicago with Mike Fury and hang out with Sanford Parker is like awesome in and of itself. But then the fact that at the end of that process, I have something that I can hold in my hands that I can look at with my own two eyes and feel and listen to and experience and other people who have similar tastes and probably have experienced similar painful things in life can experience this as well. And it's like a telepathic linking of souls that transcends space and time. It's the closest thing to time travel that we have is art, like the shared experience of art. And my preferred form of that happens to be music. But how else can you connect with somebody that may be thousands of miles away who had an experience that might have been decades before something that you're experiencing? But when you listen to them, their cathartic transformation of this experience into sound, it resonates with you, and you feel a camaraderie and a love with this person that you might have not ever even met, that literally transcends space and time and physical contact. I mean, to me, that's time travel and that's telepathy, and it's fucking rad. And that's why I make records. Especially in the States right now, making records isn't like, I don't know. I can't imagine being younger and coming up and being exposed to music the way that it's being delivered to people now. It's all about singles, and it's about all these like external metrics that don't mean anything in reality. And I wonder what it's like to, as a younger person, to not see music, see like an album as a crucial means of delivery for good music. And I'm not saying every young person looks at it that way, obviously, but it's so different. It's really a challenge to genuinely empathize and put yourself in other people's shoes, especially across generations. But, you know, coming up, getting into music, for me, it was like once I figured out what an album is, that became the paradigm through which I experienced music. I didn't give a shit about singles. I didn't give a shit about music videos, really. I mean, some of them were really cool. Like the Last in Line video, fucking Don Coscarelli directed that. He did Phantasm. So a really good music video can be a cool art form. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like, and I'm literally just like making this up as I go along right now. So if it's disjointed, I apologize. But to me, if you are a musician, you make albums. You don't focus on singles. You don't focus on this or that. You can put a little bit of focus on the aesthetic, obviously. That's important. But the be all end all as a musician is to make an album that front to back crushes and that's great. making one good song, any asshole can do that, you know. You do 8, 10, 12 in a row. That's something else. Anyway, I'm for sure rambling right now. My damn dogs are barking at me to shut the hell up. So yeah, Ghost at the Gallows, man, coming out August 18th. Went through a lot on this one. I always go through a lot when I make an album. It's weird. I don't take them lightly because it's like when I open that door, it really starts affecting my life. And it can be really profoundly great ways, like going and getting to play Hellfest and stuff like that. Meeting some of my best friends, you know, making friends with some of my heroes. Kirk Winstein being the first one that comes to mind. Now, like my favorite dude on planet Earth. But there's also, there's waves and ripples that go the other way too. And I don't know if it's directly related to me opening Pandora's box and opening that door and walking through that door like, okay, it's time to undergo this ritual again of making an album. But I mean, it has significant consequences in my life. And there's no other life I would rather have than writing cool songs, making albums, playing cool shows, meeting cool people, and connecting with people through music, which is like my favorite thing in the world. Man, I'll read fan mail some other time. I've been rambling on for too damn long. So yeah, part 2 of this, I'm gonna have Mike Fury come in here. Part 3 of this, I'll have Jeff Henson come in here and talk a little bit more about this album. There's an unboxing video on my channel right now. Go check that out if you want to see what it looks like. I'm going to be doing a track by track video as well. I'll be recording that later this week. That'll be up shortly after the release of the album. Yeah, please subscribe to this channel. I would appreciate it. If you want to come see us, it's spiritadrift.com/tour. That's pretty much all I got, man. Sorry if this was super disjointed and weird, but hope it made a little bit of sense. And write me at BigRiffEnergy@gmail.com. Try and figure out that I shall return inside joke, and I'll send you some free stuff. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot. See you next time.